We are the winners. Watch us glimmer. Like the sun for the champions. Lose control, body and soul. We push ourselves to the maximum. The champions, the champions. We are the champions.
Hello, hello, hello. Greetings and welcome to the trippy setup. Yes, those are my legs. Yes, this is my head. Yes, there's lots of sparkles and there's lightning back there and I have a ponytail to look like Sarah. Hi, I'm Sarah. Let's get started. So welcome to the live stream. Today we're going to do something a little different. Normally we have a CosPilates class or a one-to-chair challenge. We're going to start a new series today called 101s. And so this series is going to focus on a specific set of exercises or a specific concept within classical Pilates, and we're going to break it down. We'll review safety and proper technique, all of the variations of exercises from beginner through advanced, and then we can go through the progressions to how to work yourself up from beginner to advanced on these exercises. Today we're doing overhead exercises, and we're starting with overhead, which I didn't think we would because overhead is a little more advanced. However, you pop on Instagram, you scroll through, you see a lot of athletic and acrobatic stunts on there. Everyone likes to post their fun control balances and advanced overhead exercises on Instagram. And you may feel inspired to want to start upping the ante in your own practice and give it a go. So I wanted to start with overhead because I think it's the most underrated in terms of they're very complex. I will say that. So we're going to break it down today. We're going to go through all the nuances. We're going to geek out about them, or at least I will. And hopefully we have some fun. All right. From here, we're going to start with chapter 1 of our little thing here, which is the exercises and techniques, tips, and tricks. Where did I go? Where is Sarah? Oh my gosh, she's on the mat. The magic of movie making, the magic of live streaming. All right, so we're going to start with a couple of disclaimers. Overhead is a complicated intermix of everything. There's a lot going on in these exercises, so it's important that we go through a couple of safety things first. So, first things first, no bobbleheads. What do I mean by that? Anytime that your legs are overhead, you stare straight up to the ceiling. You cannot turn your head side to side. It's very possible to really hurt your neck when you move it overhead. So, whenever I am down and my legs go overhead, I just stare straight up to the ceiling. We're not turning the head. We don't want to crunch the head. Do anything funky. Keep the neck long and soft and keep your gaze soft to the ceiling. Try to remove the tension from the front of the throat. Really start to work it into your upper body. That's really going to help you keep away any urges to move the neck or make any spontaneous adjustments. So no bobbleheads. Legs overhead, gaze up to the ceiling. The next one, use your arms. Overhead looks like a leg exercise, right? We throw the legs overhead and then we let them go back in front of us and throw them over our head and bring them back. No, not in Pilates at least. It's a full body experience. with overhead. So this is not a leg exercise. This is a control exercise. It's a core exercise, and it's a arm exercise. So use your arms more than you think. That's something that a lot of people forget about in overhead because there's so much going on. It's easy to lose track of where you are in space, what body parts are going where. So use your upper body to help you. The more that your upper body helps you, the more you can use your core to find control in the movement. What do I mean by that? If we look at a shoulder bridge, if we don't use our shoulders, you see how my waist kind of sinks? I'm using my core and glutes to stay lifted, but I could get a little higher, and my shoulders are starting to shrug towards my ears, and the technique is not quite there. I'm not getting everything that I could out of this exercise, especially on the way down. Because I'm not using my arms, I have less space to roll down back to the mat into. So, let's do that again, but use my arms. If I press into the mat, wide collarbones, gaze up towards the ceiling. Look at all that space I have now. Shoulders away from my ears. That press gives me an extra lift, and I've got more of a long diagonal spine shape, which is what we're looking for. And then as I roll down, I keep pressing my triceps down into the mat. Keep pressing, pressing, pressing. I'm creating space to roll down into, bone by bone. And that's allowing me to find more articulation or spinal flexion to wave through that mount and dismount. Pilates is all about creating space to move into. So control is the goal. Use your arms more than you think. Our next principle to think about. Dun dun dun, length over height. If you ever hear a Pilates instructor say throw, that's a little shocking. So, with overhead, the thought, right, is to get the legs over, chuck them overhead, or to, for jackknife, high, 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 reach the ceiling high. We want to think less about height and distance, back or up. You want to think more length. It's similar to what we think about if you've ever done swan on the mat, which is an extension exercise. Yes, we're lifting up, right? We're lifting our back, using our back and abs to lift our upper body up. But we're also thinking about length, creating space in the waist, reaching the crown of the head long, and reaching as we lift up. So it's not just a straight up motion, it's a reach and lift, like you're gonna grasp at something as you scoop up. It's the same principle with overhead. You want to feel this infinite lengthening of your legs out of your torso. That's going to help you get up more than it seems at first. So this feeling of opposition is really important when we're talking about overhead. It's what keeps us within bounds and keeps us thinking about control and keeps us from losing control, because it gives us a bit of a framework to maintain our shapes. So what do I mean? As the legs are going up into jackknife, I'm thinking less throwing my legs up to the ceiling, and I'm thinking of lengthening my legs long. When I do that, my legs are doing work, but I'm bringing it more into my core. Same thing with overhead. I'm not throwing the legs back. Roll over. Overhead on the reformer. Too many names. They're all the same exercise. With rollover, I want to think of reaching my legs up to the ceiling. So much so that it lifts my center. And then on the way back, thinking about that opposition, reaching my tailbone long to the floor, and then reaching my heels away like a tug of war of my tailbone and my heels. This slows down the movement and allows you to access more control and take control over the movement. It's kind of like the dress doesn't wear you, you wear the dress. You do overhead, overhead doesn't just happen to you. It's it's kind of like that. It's about finding that control. Pilates was originally called Contrology. Somehow it got the name Pilates after the creator, but its original name is Contrology. So they don't call it that for nothing. All right. So that's a little bit about what we're going to think about as we go through these exercises. Now I'm going to do more of a demo of these exercises. Dun dun dun! All right. Do we love the production today? Because I'm very excited about it. I hope you all are enjoying it. So, starting with our first exercise called roll over, or similar, short spine. Short spine is a reformer exercise, but I will be demonstrating a version of it for the mat. So, all of my reformer people, if you really want to test your reformer knowledge and your strength, try reformer on the mat. It's 1,000 times harder, but it's one of my favorite things to do with clients. And I love to do reformer on the mat classes myself. I love a challenge. So let's do rollover. Rollover is the first advanced exercise in the classical advanced system that you'll do. So you start with your 100, your roll up, and then after your roll up, you go right into roll over. Makes sense within the composition of the system, and you're going to see why. So we're lying in our supine position. We've just finished our final roll up. And basically, rollover is a roll up in reverse. From here, the legs lift up to 45 degrees. Toes are pointed. From here, you reach the legs up and overhead. Maybe they tap the floor, maybe they don't. Then from here, you flex your feet, open your legs, just about shoulder width, and then that same thing, reach the tail to the floor as you reach the heels away, slowly rolling down bone by bone until the legs circle back together and you start again. So a little faster. It comes up, open, lower, and then you reverse. Point the toes. Keep the legs open as they come up. Zip the legs together, flex the feet, and slowly roll down. So a couple of things with overhead. You can start it in a couple of different ways. So, I started from the ground. This is the most advanced way to do it. Requires a lot of lower ab strength. Legs start zipped together at the bottom. Legs lift up and over. This is the most advanced way to start. If this is your first time giving it a go, start with the legs either pointing up to the ceiling or to 45 degrees. It's going to give you a little more lever for your legs to get them over. The other thing, if you have a little bend in your knees, that's totally fine. It's less about getting the legs straight and more about what the rest of your body's doing. Couple of key things with overhead. That length over height is really important here. And you probably noticed that when I was doing it. I'm reaching the legs long, like I'm reaching them out of my torso to bring them over. That slows down the movement so I can access more control. Another thing to think about with this, my tail is lifting up to the ceiling. So and my waist is really long. So what's happening is that I'm getting taller. I'm pressing into my arms, lengthening my waist and getting a lot of space here. If I don't and I crunch into it, I'm not using any muscles. I'm just hanging out on my shoulder blades. I'm not doing an exercise. I'm just stretching my lower back, which can feel quite nice, but that's not what we're going for. So press into the mat. Use those triceps and shoulders. Wide collarbone, shoulders away from the ears. Lift your waist. Create space in the waist and lift your tailbone up and away. From there, the legs stay parallel to the floor or they tap the mat and you slowly roll down. That's your rollover. I do want to talk one more safety thing here. Let's bring up that safety text. Safety alert, safety alert. Another thing to remember when you're doing these overhead exercises is where you want your point of balance to be. You never want to be on your neck. So at any point, my point of balance is right in between my shoulder blades. That's where you want to be. So you press into your arms, you widen the collarbones, you create some space in here. Shoulder blades will widen slightly, and you want that balance point to be right in between your shoulder blades. We never want to be up on the neck. That's a no-no. We can hurt ourselves. So you can kind of see, right, when I'm overhead, I'm not on my neck. I don't even want to go. If I go more backwards, I'm going to be on my neck, which I don't want. When I press into my shoulders, I lift away. So you want to find that balance point right. I'm going to lift my arm. This is an interesting move. Right in between the shoulder blades is what we're looking for. Short spine. Short spine's, I think, a little easier than rollover in terms of the choreography, but similar. So if you're a reformer person and have never tried it on the mat, here you go. Legs shoot out to 45 degrees, heels together, toes apart. Same thing, lengthen to lift up and over. For my short spine, I don't tap the floor. I keep high diagonal with the legs. That press into the shoulders and that lift in the waist is huge, especially here, as we bend the knees to bring the knees to the shoulders. If I'm not pressing the mat away, I'm going to sink. And that opposition is super important. I press the mat away as my knees heavy closer to my shoulders. Then from here, you slowly, in a tight ball, round all the way down. It's really hard, but it really works that control and that spinal flexion. And that's our short spine and our rollover. That's the first advanced exercise in the system, which I think is hilarious because it's quite intimidating the first time you do it. I remember my first overhead. You never forget it. All right, let's move on. Our next exercise is corkscrew. So I put corkscrew after rollover for a couple of different reasons. Because corkscrew is something that you will perform in the classical intermediate system. It's an exercise that you learn. The advanced version is not too different from intermediate. However, if you don't have rollover mastered or feel like you've got enough control of rollover, corkscrew is going to be a struggle. And you're going to see why pretty quickly. Because we add even more choreography to our overhead exercise. So arms down, same supine position. This time the legs go straight up to the ceiling. So our normal corkscrew is just a big circle of the legs. To the right, circle down and around to the left, and center. To the left, circle down and around to the right, and center. You probably know where I'm going with this. To add on for the more advanced corkscrew, the legs come overhead, circle to the right, roll down your right side body, circle to the left, come up the left side center. Same thing, you roll down the left side, circle around, and lift up overhead. So that's the more advanced overhead version of corkscrew. I am not very good at this exercise. I feel very unruly in it. But it's a really fun one to try and play in and experiment in. So it does hold a special place in my heart, even though it's not my favorite thing to do. I know it's good for me. So why it's important to master your rollover before you start doing that probably speaks for itself. You need to have a lot more control because you're moving in a circle. And that spinal flexion and the order of operations, the Pilates PEMDAS, buzzword, is really important here. So what do I mean by that? Looking at our roll down, we start with our lower back, middle back, upper back, articulating all the way down to the mat. Same thing when we come up. Head, upper back, middle back, lower back. It's the same thing when we do overhead. Roll over. Upper back, middle back, lower back, legs. Legs, lower back, middle back, upper back. That's important. If you can't master the control of making sure each of those steps happen when they're supposed to, it's going to be more difficult to add a circle. So finding the control to be able to move through that original rollover is going to make you stronger in corkscrew. Corkscrew also accesses your obliques more. Your obliques are your side abs. So we have, working from superficial to most internal, you have the rectus abdominis, which is what I call the Hershey bar muscle. That's the one where you get the 6-pack or the 4-pack or insert pack number here. That's your most superficial muscle. We're going a little deeper when we think about obliques. So underneath your rectus, you have your obliques, your internal and external obliques. They wrap around your sides. You really have to activate those in order to complete this corkscrew because you do favor one side over the other as you roll down. Pressing into those arms. Super important in corkscrew. To access that spinal flexion, it's important to have a lot of space to be able to roll the body through. So using your arms and upper body to stay nice and stable will give you a balance point, but it's also going to allow you to relish more in that movement. Let's move on to our next exercise. Dun dun dun. Jackknife. One of my mortal enemies. I like to spell it jackknife with one K as one word. I don't know if that's cool or not, but that's how I like to write it in my notes all the time. I almost wrote it like that for this stream, but I had to be grammatically correct for you all. So jackknife, you've probably seen this. Yogis do it, Pilates people do it, calisthenics people do it. You might know something called candlestick. It kind of looks like candlestick. Arms long down by your side. Legs either start down on the floor, or as we did for rollover, high diagonal, or up to the ceiling. I'll mix it up and go high diagonal. So from here, you press into your arms, and you lift your legs straight up to the ceiling. Find that long line, and then slowly, with control, roll it on down, back to your start position. That's your jackknife. Simple enough, but hard to do. Simple in concept, hard to do. So, that whole thing about using your arms more than you think, it's center stage on jackknife. Use your arms. You see the text? Use them. Jackknife is all about creating space to find control. And that's going to help you be successful here. Press into those arms. Press, press, press like crazy. Your triceps are going to burn. That's okay. They will get stronger. And we're going to go through exercises to strengthen them later on. So even as my legs are lowering down, I am pressing the floor away like crazy. Like I'm someone at a concert stopping the crowd from jumping the stage. I'm pressing into the floor, pressing the crowd away. It's the same thing here the whole time. My triceps are on fire. That's what you want to feel. If you're feeling it in the back of your arm here, that's the right spot. If you're squeezing your neck or shrugging your shoulders, you need to release it. Keep thinking wide collarbones. Wide collarbones, you've got a pair of hoops on. Keep the space for the hoops. Final thing with jackknife, location of the legs. Goal is to have the legs in a perfect straight line over the hips. That's really hard. I can't do it. I maybe have done it once for a millisecond, but that's what we're looking for. So when we're lifted up, you see how here my legs are a little more back? I want to keep thinking forward, forward, forward. So I get, woo, more of a straight line. Roll down. Stage crew, how was that? Oh, thumbs up from stage crew. So that must mean it was pretty good. So that's what you want to think of with jackknife. Once you get up there, you're pushing the legs away from you. And as you push away, don't forget length. You push away and lengthen. Push away and lengthen. Push away and lengthen. Woo! That felt good. I think we're going to end on that one because that one felt really good. Thumbs up or thumbs down, stage crew. All right, cool. So that's your jackknife. Fun fact about jackknife, it is not considered an advanced exercise in the classical system. I was wrong in saying that rollover is the first advanced well, it is technically the first advanced exercise that you learn. I did say that. It's not the first overhead exercise you'll learn. The first overhead exercise you learn is jackknife. Crazy? Yeah, I think so too. So I think rollover should be the first one you learn, but that's just not how it goes. So that's the first overhead exercise you will learn in your Pilates journey when you start intermediate mat. A solid jackknife is going to prepare you for a lot more creative, eccentric overhead exercises later on. All right, let's move on to our next exercise. High scissors and high bicycle. I don't know if it's high bicycles. I think it's just high bicycle. We're going to go with that. It also fits on my screen better. So, high scissors and high bicycle. Kind of a weird one. It doesn't look like you're doing much, but there's a lot going on. That sounds like a Pilates exercise. That's how they mostly are, right? It doesn't look like you're doing a lot, but you're really doing the most. So, this is part of the advanced system. It happens later on in your class. So this is in the last third of your class, I want to say. Yeah, about the last third, which is wild when you think about everything that you have to do up to that point. So high scissors and high bicycle. It's a combination of jackknife, rollover, and leg series on the mat. So we're going to start. I'll start with the legs down since it's an advanced exercise. We lift the legs up and overhead. This looks like the start of our overhead. Now we add on. You walk your shoulders a little more underneath you and put your hands on your lower back. So you kind of want it to feel like you're sliding your hands into your back pockets. So you're like a little on your booty and a little on your hips, so lower back area. From here, you're going to shift forward so that you have weight in your shoulders and your arms. So I'm not just letting it go and sinking into my arms. I'm still thinking about that long diagonal spine. I'm drawing the tail away from my forehead. I'm lifting my waist so that I've got a lot of core happening here. I don't want to dip. You want to think long diagonal line, not U-shape. So this is the high, and now we do the scissor part. One leg lowers towards the face, the other reaches towards the ground. And then you transition. And switch. And switch. Let's do some bicycle. Same tactic. Maybe you touch the floor, maybe you don't. Woo! As you do this, you want to try to not shift in your hips. Keep pressing the floor away. Keep lifting through the waist. And then when you're all done, I'll do the advanced transition because it's fun. You bend your knees in towards your forehead. You lift up and over with control. Land for shoulder bridge. And then that's your next exercise. Pretty cool, right? So high scissors, high bicycle. Kind of talked about a couple of elements in that are really important. Some of the things that we talked about at the beginning. It all comes back to foundations, right? Even in the most advanced exercises. Use your arms more than you think. Opposition. And length over height. huge here. With scissors specifically, you want to think less about the leg coming towards your face and more about the leg lengthening away from you. That opposition, that reach of that leg away from you is going to challenge your core a lot more than trying to bring the leg to your face. It's the same applies with our classic series of 5 scissor. You want to think more about the leg reaching away from you, because that's going to give you that space in the waist. It's going to allow you to access more control. Transitions are also exercises, especially with your scissors and bicycles. We don't want to just throw the legs. We want to think about control all the way through the movement. So even as the legs pass each other, there's control. I'm not just throwing the leg and forgetting about it. Really finding that control. That one's a ball. All right, control is the goal. I've got all the rhymes today. The Pilates, PEMDAS. I've got to write all this stuff down. All right, next exercise. We're going to cover my ultimate final boss, control balance. This is an advanced exercise that I cannot do. I can do maybe 60% of it. I'm going to do the best I can for you today. It's, in my opinion, for me, the hardest overhead exercise. But it's a really fun one to set as a goal for you to master because it looks really cool. All of our overheads start in the same way. Legs down, high diagonal, or up to the ceiling. From here, the legs come up and overhead. They touch the floor behind you. Now from here, this is where things get a little weird. Arms come back behind your head to grab onto your right ankle. Your left leg comes up to the ceiling. And then from here, you scissor switch. Woo! Oh my gosh, am I doing it? Yeah! And then scissor switch. And then that's your control balance. You keep doing that and then dismount with grace and beauty. I have difficulty finding my balancing point, so it's in my work in progress exercises. So control balance, it's a little wacky. Where do I even start? That whole use your arms more than you think. Use your shoulders more than you think. So now you don't have the arms. That's why it's so advanced. You don't have your arms to help you get that extra lift. Press into your shoulders. That's going to help. It's going to help you find that balance point more effectively. The other reason why this is so advanced is because the arms go back behind you. You can't compensate with the arms. Your whole torso is staying lifted with your center. This is very, very core heavy. Not that the other ones weren't, but if you don't lift your core at all, you're not staying up, you're not getting over, it's not happening. So, what do I mean? You can kind of get a better sense if I do a shoulder bridge with my hands back. So when I lift up, I'm still using my shoulders, but I really have to lift more from my center because I can get a lot more space when I press down into my arms. I don't get as much with the arms behind me and more distal. So I really need to lift my abs and use my glutes more. When the legs are overhead and my arms are back here, woo, this is fun. If I can even do it. See, I have trouble getting my balance point. There, in between my shoulder blades. And I have to use my core. I wasn't doing that as much before. Relax your neck. You want to feel that lift of the center and that hug towards your center. So lifting away from the floor and then feeling that magnetic ball in the center of your body. Everything draws towards it. That's going to help you stay up in your control balance. Oh, I'm out of breath from that one. Let's move on because that was pretty good. I don't think I've done control balance that good ever in my life. So I'm glad we have it on recording. So those are your overhead exercises. They're similar but different. They're a fun bunch of moves. There's a lot going on in them, but that makes them very exciting, at least in my opinion. But you might be sitting there going, how the heck do I do that? I don't even know where to start. I'm going to help you. We're going to go through some exercises that you can work on and progress up to doing these overhead exercises. So let's cue the transition into the progression. A lot of P words with Pilates, right? Pilates is about progression. It's progress, not perfection. That's something that I learned from the great Carrie Campbell. Pilates is progress, not perfection. So all of this stuff should be exciting because every time you do it, you're going to surprise yourself and you're going to learn even more about your body. So we're going to break down the overhead exercises into several mat exercises that you can do at home, just with your mat, so that you can work your way up to doing some legs overhead. So the first exercise that we're going to do is the roll up. And I already kind of demoed that a couple of times here. This is the second exercise in classic mat system. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or advanced. Roll up comes second after the 100. Start lying down. Legs are zipped together. Feet are flexed. Arms come up to the ceiling. You take an inhale to prep. Exhale. Find your curl. And then roll all the way up to seated. When you reach the top, lift up to dive forward. Keep drawing your abs back as you reach your arms forward. Now, like you got punched in the gut in an anime, you're going to slowly round back. Keep reaching the legs and arms towards the front of the mat as the back of the ribs reach towards the back of your mat. Lower back, middle back, upper back, head. And that's your roll up. Roll up is hard. It's crazy that it's one of the first exercises you learn. But it's a really great one to practice, and it's a really great one to figure out like where you are in space and to track your progress as a Pilates practitioner. So we love roll-ups. Couple of things to think about with roll-ups. Why do we do them? It accesses our spinal flexion. So flexion being the rounding of the spine. It allows us to find more articulation within our movement. So especially if we sit at a desk, we can get a little stiff in the back. This will kind of juice the spine and give us a little more flexibility and mobility through the back. Gives you a little back massage as well. It also practices the principle of control, right? So the fun thing about Pilates is that doing it faster is hard, but doing it slower is harder. Normally doing it slower, you would think it would be easier, but anything slower in Pilates is actually harder. So if you want to get good at Pilates, maybe a little faster than your friends, take things a lot slower. You're going to get a lot stronger doing it that way because you have to access more control from your center. So I always like to tell my clients, you want to think it takes the same amount of time to get up as the same amount of time to get down. The ascent and the descent take the same amount of time. So we can take it as long as 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now we've got to do the same back. 8, 7. I'm even going a little slower than 10 seconds. 4, 3, 2, and 1. So it's all about that spinal flexion, getting that mobility through the spine, and finding that control. Let's talk modifications to simplify. Keeping the legs straight, easier than it sounds for some. Some of us have tight hamstrings. Bend of the knees is okay here. We want to think insides of the knees, ankles, and big toes zipped together. I'm bow-legged, so when my legs are together, my knees turn in towards each other so they don't meet. So sometimes I do roll-ups with my knees slightly bent to activate my inner thighs more and to encourage proper alignment. So taking a bend of the knees is totally valid here, whether you have tight hamstrings or you're bow-legged. If the arms overhead is a little tough, it's a little sticky getting up, a way to modify, bring your hands to your sides. You're going to press your hands into your hips, and then as you curl up, you're going to press and reach your arms long down your legs. And you can do the same thing as you come back. Think press in and reach long. So that's one way you can start. If you want, you can even gently hold on to the leg. Once you feel more confident in that, you can bring the arms up to the ceiling, maybe straighten the legs a little more. The ultimate challenge for roll-up. Hands come all the way back so that your biceps frame your ears. The key here is to not splay the ribs. We want to draw the rib cage down and knit the front of the ribs together. So we don't want to overarch. So this requires a little more nuanced control. The arms stay here for this more advanced version as you take an inhale. Exhale. Roll all the way up. Arms stay framing the ears as you take it all the way down. So now your center of gravity is a little different. This one's fun. And I'm sounding a little croaky because I am working. Woo! So that's your more advanced roll-up. I think it's easy to tell if you take the roll-up, you flip the orientation, it looks just like your rollover. So once you get really good at roll-up, you're going to be in a really good spot, not just for overhead exercises, but for every exercise in the Pilates system. Can't stress mastering roll-up enough. Next exercise. Another spinal flexion exercise is our shoulder bridge. Shoulder bridge is an exercise that everyone should be doing more of. It's got so many benefits for everyone. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're injured. There's so many ways to do shoulder bridge, and it's great for everyone. So it's especially helpful for overhead. And you can kind of see, right, how roll-up looks similar to a lot of our overhead exercises. That shoulder bridge looks pretty similar, especially to jackknife or high scissors, high bicycle. So legs for shoulder bridge will be inner hip width distance apart. What do I mean by that? Find the bony landmarks of your hips and then follow that line. That's your inner hip width. We don't want to think width of our silhouette, which is technically hip width, but it's too wide of a stance. You want to take a more narrow stance. So find those bony landmarks of your hips. That's the line that you travel down. Placement of heels can be a little confusing in shoulder bridge. This is a tip that I use all the time. You're going to curl your head, neck, and shoulders up into your Pilates curl, and then you're going to reach for your heels. You want your heels and fingertips to just graze each other. And that's going to be a good spot to start for your bridge. So I was a little too far away. So that's going to be good for me. So you can use that as a guide. It might not, be perfect, but it's a good starting point for you. Arms are long by your side, wide collarbones. You take an inhale to prep. Exhale, we kind of do a roll-up, except hips come first. Squeeze your glutes, lift your hips to the ceiling. Up, middle back, upper back, press into your shoulders. Now, shoulder bridge, we want to find a long diagonal spine. Less gymnasty, where we get U-shaped, and more of a diagonal line. You want to think opposition, your hips lift up, and your rib cage drops. So that knitting of the front of the ribs, you might feel like it's a little lower, but that's okay. Hips lift, ribs knit together. Another point to think of, Pilates geometry. Your pubic bone and the bottom of your breastbone should line up in a long diagonal spine. That's your position. You're going to feel this a ton in your glutes and your hamstrings. You're going to feel supported and stable in your shoulders, and you're going to feel your core working. From here to dismount, you press into those arms like we do in overhead. Slowly lower down, bone by bone. So I think it's pretty obvious with shoulder bridge how practicing this is gonna benefit your overhead. It's gonna work on your shoulder position, where the shoulders need to be set on the mat in order to activate them. It's gonna help you work your triceps and your shoulder strength. And then it also helps with your spinal flexion and your coordination through your body. It's basically jackknife without the legs, which is nice. So you think about the control. You want to think a lot about your dismount out of shoulder bridge. Mount is important, but the dismount, especially for overhead, is really important. Think about how smooth and minute you can make this exercise. Can you get each vertebra down in order like a stack of Legos? The more spinal flexion and control you can find, the more your overhead's going to be benefited. I think that was enough on shoulder bridge. We could do a whole stream on shoulder bridge, so let me know if that sounds interesting to you, because I can deliver it. Next exercise, so we have our roll up, our shoulder bridge, and this is one that I'm going to call poke the ceiling. I've heard it called lower lift. There's already a Pilates exercise called lower lift, so to make it less confusing, I call it poke the ceiling. If anyone knows the actual name for this exercise, or another name for it, I would love to know. So poke the ceiling. You're going to lie down on the floor in your supine position, and we'll start with making a triangle shape with your hands, like so, or a diamond shape. You're going to bring that triangle underneath your sacrum, so underneath your tailbone. You know you're in the right spot when you have 8 fingers poking out from under your booty. If none of your fingers are showing, you're too far up your back. So bringing them forward, finding those 8 fingers poking out, you kind of sit on that diamond like a little pillow. Bend your knees into your chest, keep your head, neck, and shoulders down, and the legs come up to the ceiling. From here, you literally poke the ceiling. Lift the legs and hips up and lower them down. Lift up and lower down. And lift. And lift. So this exercise, it's kind of like a baby jackknife. Legs are lifting up to the ceiling. You're lifting up to 2 or 3 vertebrae up, or maybe a little more. But start with 2 or 3 vertebrae up off the mat and come down. The key to this not just being something you just flop around on the mat doing, and what makes it an actual exercise, is the control on the dismount. So, how do you know you're dismounting correctly? This is a correct dismount. This is incorrect. It's sonically different. So, you know that you're working that spinal flexion and that control if you're coming down silently. If you're crashing to the ground and making noise, you're just throwing your legs up and just letting your body fall to the floor. So, you want to think with this. You lift up, try to slow it down as you come down. Slower is harder. It activates all of your little muscles to help control. So try to slow down that landing and not just crash to the floor. That one's really going to help with your overhead, because dismounting is truly the hardest part of overhead. Getting over is fine. Coming down, that's where the work comes in. That's where you go from beginner to intermediate to advanced, is when you really refine your dismounts out of your overhead. Next exercise. Tricep push-up. So we talked about triceps for overhead, specifically for jackknife. You're going to be using your upper body and specifically your triceps and your shoulders to help stabilize you and create more space as you press the ground away. There's a lot of different ways you can work your triceps. There's a lot of traditional free weight exercises. You can use free weights, you can use TheraBands to do kickbacks or skull crushers. I'm going to show you a tricep push-up because it's a body weight exercise and it's also within the Pilates vocabulary. So most of the time, unless you're told otherwise by a teacher, you will be doing tricep push-ups in Pilates. We rarely do more open elbowed push-ups. So think your chaturangas in yoga, tricep push-ups similar. So the easy way to simplify this, obviously, knees. You can tuck the toes or you can keep them long. And you find your long line. Your more advanced version, you lift up, right, into your floating plank, or in Pilates we call it front support. Now your tricep push-up. You want to think bending the elbows and keeping the elbows close to your rib cage as you press up. So you bend at the elbows, ribs and elbows graze each other, and then press up. So less out and more in. Like you're sandwiched between two panes of glass and you have to do your push-up within that little glass sandwich so that elbow grazes the rib. So you can do them on your knees, you can do them standing up. Now, to advance your tricep push-up, it's a kind of more conceptual thought as you do them. Thinking about what we talked about at the beginning of our stream, opposition. So, that length over height is going to help advance your tricep push-up. So, what do I mean by that? As you're lowering, I want you to think reaching your sternum away from you. So we're not just lowering, we're reaching. Reaching. So as if I have a string on your breastbone, and as you're lowering into that push-up, I'm pulling that string and sending you long as you lower. So let's see if you can notice a difference. Here's me not lengthening in my tricep push-up. Here's me working more length. Do you see a difference? I worked a lot harder on that second one, and not just because it was the second one. So tricep push-ups, if you're on a budget and don't have anything in your house that you can use as weights, just do push-ups, man. They're hard enough. So tricep push-ups are the way to go. It's gonna build your chest, build your triceps, build your shoulders, and as you start to advance them, you're getting core because you're in a front support position. Can't go wrong with your tricep push-ups. Whew, that one was fiery. Let's move on. Single leg circles and leg circles. So we've talked a lot about how overhead is kind of not about the legs. We're going to talk about the legs now. It's not that they're not important, but they're not the prime mover in your overhead. So some things to think about with legs in overhead. I always think of that legs overhead song. So the key thing to think about with your legs in overhead, flexibility is helpful. Hip flexibility, hamstrings and calves. That can be very helpful, especially as you advance, because having the legs straighter makes the movement feel a little smoother. So working on flexibility is important and can be helpful. Opposition and length over height, they keep coming back. Super important with legs. The other thing that's important about legs that we really haven't talked about until now is the idea of hugging the center line with your legs. So in a lot of our overhead exercises, our legs are zipped together, right? As we lift the legs up, or they come over, they're zipped together, or they're coming together at some point. This hug towards the midline is incredibly important. And what's a midline? Midline is this imaginary line right through your center. Name kind of speaks for itself. But when you find that connection of the inner parts of your legs as you move through this movement, you're not only going to work your legs, but you're also going to strengthen your whole center body. That whole center line will be stronger and more stable to help you move through these movements with more flow. So there are a lot of ways to strengthen the legs. There's a lot of ways to build flexibility. I'm going to show you 2 Pilates exercises that are great for working your hips, flexibility, and strength all at once. And of course, throwing your core in. Single leg circles is the 3rd exercise that you will ever learn in your beginner mat system. It's a great one to start out with to assess your hip mobility, your leg strength, and flexibility. So your legs are long. You bend one knee into your chest and you bring your leg up to the ceiling. It's more important that your tailbone is down. I don't care if you can whack the leg towards your face. You see how I'm like all out of whack? Get the tailbone down. It's okay if the leg is not perfectly at 90 degrees. Obviously, a bend of both of the legs is totally valid here if the flexibility isn't there at the moment. From here, you're going to point your toe and externally rotate your leg. So what we're not doing is opening the leg. We're finding the top of our femur or thigh bone, like the head of a doorknob, and we're turning it in the socket. So we're turning the toes from noon to 1 o'clock on the clock. From here, arms are long by your side. Press into those triceps. We take a leg circle. Beginners, we go across the body to start. Hip stays down. You notice my hip isn't lifting. That's really important. The hip stays down as we go across, down to a low diagonal, and lift the leg up. Across, hips stay down and square to the ceiling, around, and lift. You take it reverse. Down, around, and up. Down, around, and up. So this really works your inner leg. It works the stability of the leg that's long on the mat, your core, and your hips. So how to advance this? There's a lot of funky variations to single leg circles. The easiest way is to just make your circle bigger. How big can the circle get so that your hips stay down, but also you have control of the leg? This is another great one to track progress with. Another option, if you want to get real fancy, this bottom leg floats, and then you try circling. Try not to move this long leg. Another way, you can curl your head, neck, and shoulders up, and try not to move your hips. You can also just lose the arms. Bring the arms up to the ceiling. See if you can keep it in your core. Keep the stability through your box so that you can draw big circles on the ceiling. A lot of different variations with single leg circles. I did mention this. This is another reformer exercise. You can do leg circles at the same time with both legs. You would normally do this in straps on the reformer, but you can do it on the mat too. So we take that diamond shape again. You curl your head, neck, and shoulders up and lift your elbows up off the mat. Your legs shoot to a high diagonal. You take them out, around and up. Down, out, around and up. And then you reverse. So this really promotes that hug of the midline because you want to get them to meet and lift them up. Really being mindful of drawing accurate shapes. You don't have to use your arms as a pillow, but that can be helpful. Once again, bend of the knees, totally valid here. It's more important that you're moving the whole leg at the same time and you're not just drawing circles with your toes. So the leg can be bent and you can still, this is a very flattering position, the leg can be bent and you can still draw a full circle and activate that inner thigh. What we don't want is this, because we're not doing anything. We're encouraging mobility in our ankle, so we're not doing nothing, but we're not doing what we want. So that's single leg circles. One of those infamous Pilates exercises that looks like nothing, but is definitely something. Moving on. Corkscrew and tick-tock. I already showed you what intermediate corkscrew looks like. Keeping your hips down. It's kind of like single leg circles with both legs. Legs come across around. The one difference between this and leg circles, other than the legs being both up to the ceiling at once, great grammar there, Sarah, your hip lifts on corkscrew. So I'll try and lift my arms up so you can see, or put them behind my head. That's what I'll do. I'll put them behind my head. So, from here, I will do that. When I take my legs to the right, my hip lifts. That really requires me to use my obliques, and it works this twisting through my transverse abdominus. Come back through center. So you want to lift the hip, but keep the shoulders down. You see how I'm not taking the shoulder with me? I'm leaving it behind. We don't need her. Take it around and lift the hips and come back. So that's the biggest difference with corkscrew. It's going to really work those obliques. Couple of ways to simplify corkscrew. Hands come under the booty, and you can do a little tick-tock. You start side to side. Lift the hips, keep the shoulders down. And really think about not the legs coming back through center, but the waist initiates first to bring the legs back through center. That's how you build the core strength. So you can start with your tick-tock, hands under the booty, and then advance to your tick-tock with your arms down by your side. And then from there, we add a circle. Circle around and up. And then from there, we can add on. So maybe we add a little poke the ceiling. Come around. Poke the ceiling. Come around. And then maybe we go overhead and do our advanced version. That was a fun dismount. So, nice progression into overhead corkscrew. Isn't that so exciting? I love that. This is what I love about Pilates. It's like that seamless progression is just so delicious. Let's move on. Rolling like a ball and open leg rocker. We're going to end our progression series here with the fun ones, I guess. I don't know if people think these are fun. I think they're kind of fun. I have my wonderful partner working stage crew for me. So thank you, dearest. She hates the rolling exercises. So these are not her favorite. She doesn't like it when I teach her them, or when I make her do them when I give her privates. But they're really important, and they can, once again, they're similar to roll-ups. Once you get really good at them, they're really going to help you with your overhead. And they're also a lot of fun. So rolling like a ball sounds exactly like what it is. That's another thing that I like about Pilates, is a lot of the exercises you kind of know what it is from the name. It doesn't have some unintelligible name to it. You're going to scoot your booty close to your seat, heels together, toes apart, at 11 and 1 on the clock. So we're not in the Russian ballet. We don't need to be super turned out here. Heels together, toes apart to 11 and 1 on the clock. From here, you're going to take your hands, embrace the outsides of your legs, all 10 fingers to the front of your ankles. From here, you drag your heels in close to your seat, and you lift them up to a hover. So now the key with rolling like a ball is that you're not balancing on your sits bones. So those sits bones are the bony landmarks in your booty that you can probably feel when you're sitting. Hence sits bones, right? So if I'm balancing on my sits bones, this is really easy. I can do all kinds of funky stuff and just balance. And I'm not really having to do much. I'm kind of just sitting on my bones, and I'm balanced. We want to challenge this because Pilates is all about challenge. I want you to tuck your tail. You find a pelvic tilt, so the tailbone reaches towards the heels and up to the ceiling, like it's going to curl up to the ceiling. And find a balance just behind your sits bones. You should feel like you're balancing on an edge, Like, whoa, I could roll back at any moment, but I'm using my abs, so I'm not. From here, we roll. You rock back to the bottom tips of your shoulder blades and come all the way up, finding that same shape, same spot that we were balancing at. Rock back, come all the way up. One more time. So rolling like a ball is similar to poke the ceiling, similar to a lot of our overhead exercises. What I like about this as a drill for overhead is that it really helps you master the dismount. Same rules apply, right? That spinal flexion is really important. That scoop with your center, that control to get your spine down in the correct Pilates PEMDAS is important and key to this. This is me doing rolling like a ball with good spinal flexion. This is me not using spinal flexion. You see how I can't even get up? So I'm not getting up, but I'm smacking the ground again. We're making noise. This is the one thing that you can compare Pilates to ballet to. There's the stereotype that Pilates is only for ballet dancers. It is not. This is the one similarity that it has with ballet. If you've ever done a saute or a jump in ballet, you never want to make noise when you land. You want to be silent. It's the same thing here. So how do you do that? It's that scoop. Look at this. It's like overhead. It's like our short spine. You want to scoop so much that you use your abs to lift your hips up. And then keep drawing that waist back like in roll up to round all the way down. So you want to find so much access to spinal flexion and your core strength that you scoop so much that you could almost bring your legs and your hips completely over. The same thing happens on the dismount. So the more space you create here, then you roll down with control. And as you come up, you want to feel as if your head is going to dive through your legs. You can't roll like a ball if you don't look like a ball. So finding that tight position, scoop, lift the hips, scoop, draw the abs back as the head comes forward. Scoop, lift the hips. That's how you get up. One more tip about rolling like a ball. The instinct might be as you're rocking back to draw the legs up, right? To lift the legs and use the momentum from the legs to bring yourself up. You want to do the opposite. The opposite is going to help you get up and give you more speed. So think less about lifting the legs up and think about drawing them closer to your seat. So in the moment where you think, I got to swing the leg, think of tighter ball. That's how you're going to get up. Because the other thing that throwing the legs does, it can throw your spine out of whack, and now we're not rolling anywhere. That was a little bit of an over-dramatization, but think tight, round, deep core stability. Same applies for open leg rocker, just one difference. Before I move on, if rolling is out of the question, don't do it. I have a tailbone issue. I can do limited numbers of rolling like a ball. Some of you might not even be a thing you should do, and that's fine. Always make sure that if you do, you have a squishy mat and that you're not rolling on hardwood floor because we're rolling through the spine and that could hurt. So make sure that you have a thick, squishy surface. And also, if you don't feel comfortable rolling, just holding that balance position is core work enough. So you could just hold that position and get a lot of benefit for your center from that. Open leg rocker is similar. We bring the legs to tabletop, except instead of being rounded at the start, we open the chest at the top. And then from here, as we rock back, we contract away, find that flexion, roll up, open the chest at the top. So that's the main difference, is that proud chest at the top. Contract back, rock, lift the hips, and come up. Same thing with the legs here. The legs aren't moving. So I'm not throwing the legs back to come up. They just stay frozen in that position. This one you can also use your arms a little bit. As you come up, press like you're going to press through your legs. Use your hands to help you a little bit. The beginner version of open leg rocker is just that. The legs are in tabletop. To advance, you slowly work your hands up your legs. Maybe they get to your ankles. Maybe they stay here. And you slowly do that. If you want to get super fancy, legs come together, and I can't do this. And you can reach for your big toes. I'm not warm. And then try and do it like that. I've never been able to do this one. Whoop. And then your final version is doing it without the holding on to your legs. Which for some reason, I can do this. So same principles as rolling like a ball. Start with that one, and then you can slowly build to your intermediate open leg rocker. That's all I've got, crew. I hope this was helpful. I wasn't paying attention to the comments, so sorry if there were any questions. Stage crew, were there any questions? Okay, so that's okay. I threw a lot of information at whoever was listening anyway. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on overhead exercises, and I hope this has been helpful for your Pilates practice, or maybe it has inspired you to pick up Pilates and have some fun playing. October's on its way, so I am looking forward to bringing you some CosPilates for October. If you have any special requests, please let me know. If you have anything you want me to focus on for one-on-ones, let me know. I'm happy to do what you want. All right, from there, that's all I've got. If you want to watch me dance K-pop and be a total geek, follow me on Instagram at MoveWSarah, same as here. And from there, we'll see what happens. Let me know what you want to see. And October's going to be fun, and I hope to see you all soon. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.
We are